Pastor Steve Pierce of Central Reformed Church. I'm with Dr. Chuck DeGroat of Western Theological Seminary. Just a couple things. I had to print this out so I didn't screw it up. Chuck DeGroat, professor of pastoral care and Christian spirituality, which is awesome. That's just a great title. Remains committed to spiritual and emotional formation for the sake of mission. He can share a little bit about that. He has experience in both pastoral ministry and seminary training for over 20 years. He's also the author of several books and recently published, and I mean recently, like 4 days ago, When Narcissism Comes to Church, Healing Your Community from Emotional and Spiritual Abuse. Chuck's married to his wife, Sarah, and they have two daughters, Emma and Maggie. Chuck, good to see you, friend. Thanks for doing this with me.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Yeah, so let's just talk about current reality. It's now been a week since the COVID-19 threat has become a real threat to us, a pandemic. It's changed the world as we know it. People are finding themselves in kind of this crisis mode, not really sure how to think or behave or to act. Let's start with you. I'd like to know personally, how has this affected you and your family?
Yeah, thanks for asking. You know, last week I was in California at Fuller Seminary. I was teaching a course for them, and I was with 15 pastors. And it was like throughout the week, it was becoming more real to all of us. It was becoming real to them. A lot of them are small church pastors who are trying to figure out, what do I do? How does this change things? And this was just like a week and a half ago, right? So much has changed so quickly. But I even found myself, I flew out and then thinking about flying back last Friday around this time. A woman who was married to one of the pastors is a pharmacist, and she brought me a bag with rubber gloves and a mask. And when she gave that to me, I just felt my pulse like skyrocket, my heart start beating, and I started getting anxious. I was just, it was that combined with the fact that last week I found out that my dad has Alzheimer's, and
wow.
He's down in Florida. And there was this sense of, I can't get down there to be with him right now. So, yeah. So I got home and, my oldest is at Calvin. Calvin's done for the year. My youngest is home. And we are doing life together like the Pierces likely are right now. It just changes the reality in the home. But I'm finding myself waking up, doing more intentional meditation, contemplation, trying to dial down the anxiety in my body, just trying to do things to care for myself right now and for my family, just so that we can be well, so that we can care for others.
That's great. I appreciate that. You read a lot, and I see. I think I follow you on Instagram. You post amazing quotes. Do you find are you just reading a lot in the mornings? How do you make time for all this?
I read less than people think. When I quote people like Thomas Merton and Henry Nouwen, I think people probably think, oh, he's reading another book by Merton right now or something like that. And I've just got one of these apps that has a bunch of quotes in it that I've gathered from a lot of sources over a lot of years. I do a little bit of reading, but less than I used to do. And I'm probably in part because I'm more tuned into my own body and my own family and relationships more than I was maybe even 10 years ago.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's probably wise for me not to spend a whole lot of time in my head, especially during a global pandemic.
Well, let's talk about your work. You've been talking about your new book. You are teaching at Western Theological Seminary in Holland, Michigan.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you're doing online coursework now.
Yeah.
What does this look like for your teaching load?
Yeah, so things have changed for us. Everything went online. Thankfully, Western, Western well enough to know Western's been doing distance learning education for almost 20 years now. And so for us, it's pretty seamless. I'm sure for other high school teachers and middle school teachers, maybe even college profs, it's more difficult. But last night I hosted an impromptu Google Meetup with some students. I just threw in a bunch of names onto a Google invite, and we hung out from 8 to 9, and we checked in and we laughed a lot. And we're doing life under quarantine right now, So I'm recording videos and lectures online. And another piece of what I do. So I was a pastor for 15 years. So I still consider myself a pastor in a lot of ways, but sometimes a pastor to pastors. And so a lot of my friends from Orlando, I served in Orlando and San Francisco, just a lot of people are anxious right now. And so I'm having calls with some pastor friends and doing some recordings like this for small group leaders. And it's just strange, Steve. I mean, everything is just so different in like a week and a half, right? So
the world changed for Central Reformed. It was Thursday last week. The elders met Wednesday night. We were talking about drafting a letter to the congregation, and then the next morning, everything changed. Yeah, everything changed.
Is that when you guys made the call to go virtual and not meet together? What happened?
So Central has decided, we are the facility, the building is closed until further notification. And based on what the CDC is saying now, that puts us well into May. Yeah. And we don't want to put out dates to give people false hope. We're just saying, look, it's until further notification, the facility is closed. We want people to stay safe. And look, if somebody's carrying this virus, we want to also protect those who are most vulnerable. And we were learning more and more about this situation by the second. That's something I wanted to talk to you about is, people are freaking out. I mean, I'm getting calls. I've got folks, friends from New York City who are saying, hey, look, we're in the hot zone. If something happens, I need you to come back and do my funeral. I'm getting those texts and those phone calls about people who are, they're just convinced this could be the end days here. One of the questions that I've been thinking about is, this is kind of your world. You live in this tension. How is this whole thing a spiritual crisis? What goes through your mind when you think about that?
So for me, the spiritual and the psychological are so interconnected, right? I mean, they're virtually seamless. And so when I think about the spiritual reality of living in a situation where every day we feel more powerless, we feel more out of control, I have to think at the same time about our autonomic nervous system being taxed in this season, and adrenaline and cortisol racing and fight, flight, freeze, and fawn reactions in our bodies. I mean, we're all trying to grasp for control in a season where we're losing control, right? And so the Christian tradition is a tradition that invites us to surrender, but I think the reality is that at least what I'm waking up to is I wake up every morning about the same time. 4 mornings a week, I go and exercise at a gym that's closed now. I drive through Starbucks and I get a nitro cold brew. I haven't been doing that. I go to the seminary, I go to the coffee shop, wherever I have meetings or class that I'm teaching. I mean, the whole routine is done, right?
All done.
It's all done.
And like you and Western and like Central, everything's now going to be online, right? All the classes, the worship. And so now we're all trying to find our tech geeks to figure out how to make this all work, right?
Yeah. So we're disconnected from one another. And so that's another spiritual reality is what do we do in the face of social isolation and disconnection from our community, from the table? There are some of us who like the practice of the Lord's Supper, of communion more regularly, and that's
of course
not happening right now. For those folks out in different parts of the world who do communion every 6 months, it's not as big a factor, but like we'd all be racing to the table right now in a posture of surrender, saying, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty. And now, we're at home trying to figure out how to do it over text and FaceTime. And so yeah, everything's different. And I think to get back to your question, it's about control. and surrender. Every day, I'm reminded multiple times a day to open my hands in a posture of surrender, because my places of control are
Yeah.
each and every day being taken from me. I'd like to be down in Oviedo, Florida right now with my dad and a stepmom who frankly is probably going to pass in the next 2 weeks to a month. And I can't, we probably will be on some sort of national lockdown in the next week, I suspect. And so even that reality of caring for people I love is changed now. So
We had a a parishioner pass away, Lou Farrell, and I called her husband, Dave, and everything's on hold.
yeah,
And it wasn't from COVID-19. This was, she just died in her sleep,
yeah,
and that there's no closure right now. I can't imagine just holding it. That's
right,
so much pain, and
yeah,
to not have closure right now.
right,
So I
right.
I appreciate you sharing what you did. Of course, you want to be there. You just want to hold them, tell them it's going to be okay, that you love them. You
So when
mentioned,
you're
yeah, go
like,
ahead.
just to follow up on that, I mean, so the funeral, a memorial service, all of that is delayed now, for some time. Yeah,
Until the summer, maybe.
yeah,
We really don't know. You mentioned something about surrender earlier.
yeah.
Do you see a connection between what people are experiencing now and the Lenten season, or have we, or is it like, what do you mean Lent? Right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, thanks for the softball pitch, on that one, because it feels like, just a few weeks ago we began in dust, right?
Yeah.
You're dust, and to dust you shall return. And I was over at a local church on the north side of Holland, teaching and preaching that evening, and thinking. I had this sort of out of body experience as I heard myself talking about limitation and fragility, thinking we don't buy this at all.
No.
So we'll do our Lenten season again, but we love control. I love control. I resist limitation. I don't like my sense of fragility. And now here we are in the middle of Lent and facing all of those realities: our limitations, our fragility, our brokenness. If the numbers, the projected numbers of cases in the United States are only halfway met, we're going to know lots of people in our networks, people in our families who have this virus, right? And so our fragility is going to be seen in really palpable ways. And it's gonna affect all of us, right? I mean, right now, some of us are still at an arm's length. It's still on the news, but it's gonna come closer and closer and closer. And so how do we meet God in the midst of Lent? In a season where we might have voluntarily given up some things, but now we're being asked, by the government. We're required in some cases to give up a lot. I think we meet God.
We're asked to give up our livelihood, right? That brings me to my next question for you. What advice do you have, as a psychotherapist? What advice do you have for those who are suffering from a lack of connectivity and social engagement because of social distancing? I mean, are we going to see behaviors change? What's going to happen a month from now? What's this going to look like?
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I think it's a challenge and it's an opportunity, and I use that word opportunity carefully because I know people are sort of capitalizing on this season, like, it's a tough season, but God's at work, and I'm not at all that kind of person. But neurobiologically, we know disruption is really important for us. It's actually good for us. Um, Neurobiologists tell us that we live 90 to 95% of our lives on repeat in redundant patterns. I just named my own redundant pattern just a few minutes ago, right? And so we know that disruption is good. Now, this kind of disruption that distances us in relationship can be harder, right? And so we're going to have to find intentional ways to stay connected. Um, and we also may have to say no to things that keep us disconnected, like constantly scrolling through social media,
Right.
limiting our news time. Those are ways, I think, in the midst of disconnection, we try to feel a sense of connection. So we tune into CNN or Fox News, or we scroll through Twitter or Facebook or Instagram.
Yeah, we can't stop. We just can't stop.
No, but we have to sort of limit that. And I've told people, why don't you give yourself 2 times a day, for 15 minutes at a time or something like that. If you feel like you can't stop, give yourself a couple of times where you know you can jump on and look, but then be intentional about at least 2 or 3 connections each day of over FaceTime or Skype or whatever kind of. And I realize some people aren't like familiar with these kinds of things, you know. My mom and dad don't do FaceTime, right? And so that's tough, and they live at a distance from us. But to the extent that we can help people get connected so that we can see each other face to face, and even you know 10 o'clock this morning logging on and seeing your face, it's like
Yeah,
okay.
right. I feel the same way. By the way,
Yeah.
you're much better looking on camera than you are in person. So,
Well, yeah, thank you for that. I'm looking, and I look really gray right now, and I'm like, how did I get so gray? But
it's the wisdom. Um, hey, I've got another question for you, and this is this is something that I've been asked as a pastor, and so maybe you can help me here. What about our loved ones who aren't taking this
yeah,
seriously at all, and they're still going out
yeah,
and they're shopping and they're just making those random trips to the grocery store or wherever, and it's I just had to go out and get something.
yeah.
What and you know, for those of us who are, hey, we're in the house, stay home, this is real, but for loved ones that don't, they don't get it, what can we say to them?
That's so hard because I immediately I think of some relatives of my wife who believe that this is a creation of the media and it's a hoax, and they're not changing their lifestyle.
Yeah.
Um, I think it'll come closer to them eventually. They live in a pretty rural context, and I think it'll come closer and eventually impact them more. Um, but I don't think it's a time for confrontation, and I don't think it's a time to barrage them with 20 articles from probably news media outlets that they don't trust anyway. I think it's just a time to reach out and say, hey, here's what I'm doing right now, and here's what I'm concerned about.
Sure.
I just wanted to share with you what my needs are right now. Would you be praying for me, and how can I pray for you or connect with you in this season? And if they don't return that, if they don't engage that, then again, that's another place of surrender, right? Like, what can you do? It's not your job to convince people that this is serious. I think it's going to take another week or two, and they'll know that it's really, really serious. But
Well, as time goes,
yeah, yeah,
goes on, a lot of us parents, we've become homeschool teachers overnight,
right.
and we're trying. I
Hmm.
know my wife Monica is working with our 7-year-old Campbell.
Yeah,
We have a 3-year-old Layton. She's obviously preschool is off for her, and then we have a 1-year-old Graham. But we're really concentrating on Campbell and making sure she's working on her, spelling and all these other things, math.
yeah,
Um, you know what? Um, here's a question. We have a lot of families at Central, and families with children. Um, are there is there a word you could give to families with children of emotionally healthy ways they can be responding
yeah,
to the situation as a family
yeah.
unit?
Well, so I could probably give you some things to do. I think I'd say first, you've got to really check your own anxiety. Um, our kids pick up our anxiety, and I know that because we made 2 cross country moves for ministry positions over the last 12 or 13 years, something like that. And my girls, they may not remember some really incredible things that I did as a dad, but they remember my anxiety in the midst of that, and so to the extent that we can be working on doing whatever we need to do to give ourselves to tag team as parents, to give ourselves 15 minutes to just breathe and be quiet and get present and dial down our autonomic nervous system. That's really, really important. And then I think it's tempting to become taskmasters in this season. Like, you got to get your stuff done.
Oh yeah.
I think we have to realize also that our kids are anxious too, that they're hearing enough about this, or this is enough of a disruption. I mean, for some of them, it's like, we don't have to go to school,
Yeah.
but they know enough to know that there's something significant going on. Like, we're not going out to New Holland Brewery to have dinner tonight. We're home. Mom and dad are making meals for us every night, and life has changed. So to the extent that we can really be tuned in to how they're feeling, give them ways of like even drawing it out if they're younger, like doing some art, like draw a picture of what COVID-19 looks like. Does it look like a scary monster? Does it look like what does it look like? You draw a picture of it and draw our family, and where's our family in relation to it? And some kinds of playful things like that even give them a sense of like it will give you a sense of where they are with it. I told a friend to do this just a few days ago, and they sent back the picture, and the picture was of this big kind of like vaporous thing and their house, and it was getting closer to their house, and they were all hunkered down. And my buddy was like, I did not know that she was feeling that way until she drew the picture. And so then they could talk about, so what are you scared of? Sure. And what do you think might happen? What do you need right now?
Yeah, my 7-year-old, she's our 7-year-old, she she starts to freak out when I'm about to leave the house to go over to the church or to run an errand or whatever it is. And for her, I think it's real. I think she's starting as a 7-year-old to get it.
Yeah.
What's a comforting word? What should I never say to her? Let's start there. And maybe what's one comforting word that I should repeat to Campbell?
Yeah. I mean, don't tell your kids to not be anxious, because they're already anxious. Assume that they're anxious and give them ways of verbalizing or drawing their anxiety. And tune into like the deeper needs right now. Like they're going to have a need for some play and some rest, but they may just feel insecure, and they just may need to sit with you and feel your arms around them,
Yeah.
So into some deeper needs. I think if we're tuned in right now, this is like maybe the opportunity of this season. And I'm feeling it right now in my house. The other day, I think it was Sunday night, we were all like this. I mean, my daughters are 18 and 17. Mm-hmm. My wife absorbs it all, and she just like takes care of everything. And in the middle of it, I was just like, stop. We've got to figure out a way to do this. And I printed out a couple of sheets with like needs on it. And I was like, okay, Sarah, my wife, what do you need right now? And we were going down the sheet, and she shared some of what she needed, and my daughters shared, and I shared, and they were all very different, right?
Sure.
But it's like we settled down and we got present to one another, because it was coming out sideways and passive aggressively, and it was just our anxiety. It was our anxiety in the house, and we were spinning. We were like 4 tornadoes, right?
Yeah.
So we stopped, and now we've got needs sheets lying around on our counter, and I need 2 hours this afternoon. I just need to take a nap. I need rest. Okay, that's great. That's fine. So we're expressing those things more honestly with one another and just tuning in.
That's good. When you, I so appreciate this. I do. When you think about the church and your own church, what are some of the ways we can be supporting each other right now? What can we do?
Yeah. So all of this, you said it, I think at the outset, maybe it was right before we started, I don't know, but we're all learning on the fly how to be a church in this next season, in this new season, right?
Yeah, we are.
And so I do think that I think even with pastors right now, I know a number of my pastor friends felt like for a week they had like this adrenaline and cortisol rush of like, we're going to do it. And we're buying like cameras and microphones and, and now I think we need to recognize that now that the initial surge is dwindling a little bit, like the surge of like all the adrenaline of, we've got a global pandemic coming and let's get ready. I think we've got to realize that in the coming weeks, we're gonna move from some anxiety to some depression, feelings of powerlessness, emptiness, loss. It's almost like a withdrawal, I think, that we're going to go through, that we need to be mindful of with one another. There's this initial sense of like, what's this new reality? What do we need to do? People ran out to Costco and bought the shelf. that's probably going to die down, and people are going to have to live with the internal reality. We did the externalization thing,
Right.
and we'll probably continue to do a little bit of that. But I think what's next now is facing ourselves and our own emptiness, sadness, loss, and confusion.
I know I've experienced all of those feelings, and I'm still experiencing all of those feelings. And I will admit, I've been exhausted all week just thinking about how organizing all of this in my head. How are we as a church going to respond? Because this is a new reality. You'll get a kick out of this. So we've been tinkering around with live streaming since like October, and we haven't gone live just because we've been ordering equipment over a period of time, and we've got a wonderful tech guy who's been working on it. I'm the first person to watch live streaming. We were in San Diego for AAR.
Yeah.
And Scott Jose was preaching at the church, and our tech, he set it up. He's like, hey, let's just give this a shot. I'll set up a dummy Facebook page and tell me what you think. It was cool. And then of course, we did live streaming last Sunday, and we're like, oh, this is going to be so easy. It's going to work. We're fine. And of course there was a glitch, and there was a 30-minute delay, and I was so upset. I'm like, oh gosh, what now? These things are going to happen, right? It's funny to watch our colleagues, right? We're all trying to figure out the technology and make this work. I've been exhausted by that. I've been exhausted just by the number of people who have reached out to say, hey, my dad's not doing well and I can't get to him. The death of Lou Farrell recently, can't even go to the house to minister to her husband.
Right.
There's so much on pastors, right?
Yeah.
That the weight of the world, it seems. And then this morning, I get an email from one of the parishioners. You'll love this, man. And she reaches out and she's like, you are always ministering to other people. Your pastors are always pastoring. Who's pastoring the pastor? And it was just this, she ended with, I'm here for you. I love you. Thank you for your presence. It really meant a lot to me. So anyway, I share that story about Central trying to do live streaming, and we had our blip. And we freak out like the end of the world. Gosh, why can't everything just be perfect? And it's not. It's not. It's it's going to be messy, and we need to be cognizant of the fact that we're going to have to grow into this for the next couple of months. Okay, here's a question a colleague put out on social media that I wanted to throw out here, and then we're going to wrap up soon. What might you say to folks about how they can grow through this crisis and not just go through the crisis? I thought that was a great question. How are they going to grow through it as opposed to, just going through the motions?
Yeah. Richard Rohr had a meditation yesterday where he said, we're not hitting the panic button. We are the panic button right now. And I like that. Yeah. We're feeling all the anxiety in our bodies. And I think it's time right now to pay attention to what's happening within us. We're tempted to manage anxiety, right, in ways that, and we've got all sorts of ways of doing that, and those things are being taken away from us. And so this is a time where unfamiliar passages of Scripture may become more familiar. Wilderness, exile, seasons of lament, seasons of sadness, feeling out of control. I think that's the opportunity to grow, is to lean into that season, to lean into the loss, to lean into the famine. Now, the reality is, I can say that I don't think I'm going to lose my job tomorrow. The reality is there are a lot of people who are living paycheck to paycheck, who might not have a paycheck this week, might not have a way of buying groceries this week. And so that's, there's something really arrogant talking about like, how are we going to grow spiritually through this season, knowing that for some people, it's like, I can't afford to grow spiritually through this season. I can't afford anything. I can't even afford groceries, right?
That's right.
I think a second piece of that is how do we get out of ourselves and meet people in spaces and places of pain and in need, you know? And so we're going along pretty self-sufficiently in this season, right? Or in the season before this, I should say,
Right.
for the last, 2, 5, 10 years. And now everything's changed. And so what does it look like to love our neighbor in this season? And it looks very different perhaps than it did for some of us 2 weeks ago. There are neighbors who are literally losing jobs, going on unemployment, can't pay for rent, just like really basic things suddenly. And so the stock market was good, job numbers were good 3 weeks ago, and now they're not. And so not only can we take our own sort of exile wilderness season seriously, but we can find ways to move toward others. And I know that's challenging because we can't actually leave our homes and meet people there. But there might be ways of, through apps, Venmo or whatever, to hey, can I buy groceries this week or whatever that looks like,
Yeah, and you're, you know, you've hit on so many: financial anxiety, holistic health, and obviously the point of us meeting was to talk about ways we can respond to the COVID-19 threat in emotionally and spiritually healthy ways. So I guess the last question, because I know you got a lot to do, and we got to move on. Where are you finding joy and beauty in this moment in history? Where's Chuck DeGroat finding the joy and beauty in all of this?
Oh man, that's a great question. And I think it's sort of what immediately comes to mind is the four of us, the four DeGroats, are in the house right now. Chuck and Sarah, Emma and Maggie, and just being with my girls. I hate that my daughter's freshman year at college was interrupted because of this, and now she's here, and it's fun little things. Like last night, I was doing this virtual hangout with some students, right? And she comes in and she's like, "Dad, I've got to take a developmental psych test. Can you take it with me?" And which obviously, don't tell anyone at Calvin. I hope no one, watching this heard that. But
Right.
I swear I didn't help her in her developmental psych exam, But my daughter is like right across the way right now, my college age daughter, and I've got a little window into her life. And so it's the simple stuff like being connected to my students last night for an hour and laughing a lot, And one of my students is immunocompromised, right? And so she's dealing with this in a way like she's uber quarantined. She can't go out. And being present to her right now and seeing her laughter in the midst of a season where she's scared, She's not the over 70 kind of population. She's 24 and she's scared. So getting joy and connection, I think, is what I'd say. Family and friends, even virtually.
Yeah.
What about you?
It's we're in the same boat. We being together as a family. In fact, they're coming down the stairs now.
I heard about that.
They're the little man's coming this way. This is going to be interesting. We went hiking. We went up north. Friends of ours have a place up north, and they're kind enough to let us go up there and use it. And, hey, pal. Here we go. There he is.
Hey,
this is Graham.
Hey, Graham.
You say hi?
Hey, Graham.
And we went up there. We did some hiking on Sunday afternoon, Monday, Tuesday. It was awesome, sunny, warm.
Yeah.
We're finding every meal we're almost having together, especially dinner.
Yeah. So good.
We're always around each other. We're reading stories together.
Yeah.
I'm making a lot of calls to folks just to reach out to the church family, and and those conversations are amazing, Chuck. Just talking to folks and what they're saying to me is, we're going to get through this. I do watch the news a little bit. Mostly I watch NBC Nightly News at 6:30 because we're done with dinner and it's time to clean up. And I know that watching the news, there's a lot of fear and trepidation, But here's the thing. Here's what I always go back to. We, as Christians, we're not a people of fear and despair. We're a people of hope.
Yeah.
And the verse that I'm holding on to is in Isaiah. Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. And that's just, I just keep going back to that we will persevere. We'll be okay. Our job is to love people and to comfort them and reach out. And, that's what I think we're best at. Christians should be really focused on the other right now during this time, and that can be phone calls, emails, and letters. I mean, think about it. The old handwritten note. They got to come back.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Christians have been at their best in even when you think back to the first centuries of the church during major disasters and plagues. I mean, Christians run toward the plague rather than away, right? And this might just be a way of awakening to our identity and our mission and our responsibility. It feels significant in that sense,
Yeah, I'm there with you. There's that John Newton line in that hymn where he says, "With Christ in the vessel, I smile at the storm."
Yeah.
And it's not a statement of arrogance. It's a statement of faith, of hope, of trust. And I think that's we can do. Okay, you want to go down? I got it.
Bye, Graham.
Bye, Graham. See you, buddy. But brother, I thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's just good to see you. It's nice to connect with another human face and talk a little while.
Yeah.
So I wish you the best. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Give my best to Western Theological Seminary. And thank you for this, brother. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Peace to you. Peace to your family. Peace to your church. And I'll see you next time on another episode of Steve Pierce and Chuck DeGroat Talk Global Pandemics.
I love that we're just making this up as we go, man. This is awesome. All right, man. Behave yourself.
Yeah, you too. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye now.